All right.
How's it going,
We are
everyone?
live.
New platform, by the way. We apologize for the minute delay. Takes us a while to figure out how to use technology in the tech world.
it's
How's it
always,
going?
it's always, there's always something.
Yes, there is
There's
always
always
something. How's it going, buddy?
we're gonna let folks kind of get settled in here as we
Absolutely.
go. Would love to hear where folks are coming in from.
Yeah, text away or chat away.
Chat away.
Oh, this is a really good group. I love it.
You got the controls on the right hand side there. Um, Questions, where you're coming from. Would love to hear it. Things that are on your mind on the
You know
topic of
what? We should
AI.
structure it a little bit. On a scale of 1 to 10, 1 to 10, what is your expertise with AI? 10 being the highest, 1 being the lowest. Throw that in there. 1 to 10. How much of an AI expert are you? Scale 1 to 10.
Yeah, one might be nothing. 5 might be, I don't know, you're using, I don't know, ChatGPT or
ChatGPT.
something.
Right.
What would 10 be? 10 would be you've implanted, I don't know, a chip in your brain.
No, 10 would be my child now who like wrote an entire programming language in ChatGPT the other day. So this is happening. This is happening.
Very good. Well, look, everyone, thanks for joining. We are thrilled to be with you all today. Kind of an aggressive topic here we have today. Very bold statement that software is dead. And I think today the goal is that we kind of paint a world of what the tech landscape will look like in the next not 5 years, Bassem, like 2 years, 1 year. I mean, things that are already happening today.
We're experiencing such rapid growth at this point. Just on basic AI automations, even like small things like certificates to insurance, contract analysis, project job cost setup. You know, I liken this, Ellis. You know, I'll go way back for everyone. Brian, we got a 7, AI 7. Thank you, Brian White. A lot of zeros and ones. I like that. So I'll go all the way back. So this is my 26th year in tech, right? But I was a bit of a nerd growing up. So I got my first PC when I was 10 years old. And I remember that experience. It was actually a Samsung. It was a PC, an IBM clone. I didn't know what Samsung was. I remember we bought it like Sears. And you know, Sears sold computers. Anyway, I was 10 years old. It's 1985. The PC was amazing. It was absolutely life-changing. Absolutely life-changing. And, you know, that was a revolution. That was a revolution. You go fast forward, I don't know, 92, 93, 94, you know, almost 10 years in that cycle. And you started seeing the internet. And I remember logging into the internet with my first browser was Mosaic. And just seeing, no matter how slow it was, just seeing the fact that you could go somewhere, right? And use the internet. Now, we did not see another revolution for, you know, you saw the internet get better. You saw Google get better. You saw this get better. But it's been about 20 years. And we have been in a little bit of a freeze frame because the world got distracted with social media. So I'm not a huge social media fan, but that bump in the road became the innovation quadrant. That was the 10-year bump. That's your basics. And then, of course, you see in 2009, the mobile revolution. So very B2C revolution. There was a very business to consumer revolution over the last 20 years. Whereas when you think about the future of work, in 1985, your job radically changed when your company bought a PC. Really radically changed. And in the mid 90s, when your company figured out the internet, your job radically changed. Then we stopped changing. Then we worried about social media, Instagram, filters on phones, right. Mobile. Now we're in the next revolution. We're in that tidal wave moment. We are in that tidal wave moment where if you can't not buy AI for your company today. Because it's like saying, I'm not going to use a PC. I'm out. PCs are passe. if you think about what the PC did for automation in your company, meaning you could log in and post an AP invoice instead of writing it down, passing pieces of paper around and writing a check, AI is going to do 100x that. And what's really important, because we have some folks that are, we have some experienced folks on the call around AI, and we have some folks that are newer to AI. It's so important, Ellis, that we always remind people that AI is like saying, I want a vehicle. Right? It's not about this umbrella term AI. That's how you get frothiness, right? You don't want to get frothiness. You want to understand AI as 4 key categories. Category 1 is infrastructure. For companies that you want to know, NVIDIA is a great example of category 1. That is an infrastructure company. Microsoft, AWS, these are infrastructure companies, right? Then you have AI automation. Brick for construction is the leader in other critical industries. We have manufacturing clients. We've gone beyond construction, but construction is really our ballyhoo. AI automation means we augment workflows with robots, virtual robots that learn like a human does and then moves forward. Then you have generative. This is the one that really got people excited. Ask a question, get a novel response. Ask it to analyze something and do something, get something out of it. And then finally, you have the holy grail of predictive. There are many companies that are claiming to be AI companies and many old legacy software packages saying we're now using AI that are trying to be a little sprinkling of it. I call it the salt on top of the steak. The steak and the sizzle are companies that are making the attempt to be at least 3 of the 4. And Brick is making that attempt to be 3 of the 4. We have AI automation. We have our own generative LLM, which is truly built for the critical industries and industrialized industries, steel fabrication, reading drawings and doing online takeoffs as a human would. Those are things that ChatGPT just doesn't do. And predictive Brick time travel, trying to predict the future using past results. When you think about this, you cannot hide. There's no hiding from it, Elvis. There's no hiding.
Yeah. And I think, look, the AI has been around, the concept, the way I liken it, Bassem, is this idea of AI is using machines to use other machines. It's this idea that, when Alan Turing tried to break, the Enigma code and back in World War II, there were like 1,000,000 trillion possibilities that could be possible. So what he did was he built a machine that could crack it automatically. And this is the concept. Can we teach a machine how to learn like a human learns? And, the reason we saw a lot of the periods of stagnation is that, frankly, the capacity to train models wasn't there. It was so expensive to do. In the last couple of years, with a combination of, keep in mind, OpenAI, to build the first ChatGPT, they had to scrape every single letter from the internet. And then they had to train.
We have to talk about, this isn't, we'll do a plug for our podcast. This is a Brick advertorial, as you guys know. Control Alt Human, available on Spotify, is our podcast where we do a lot more opinions, talk a little bit more about politics, the financial markets, and how it's being affected by AI. So we'll steer away from the Ben Stiller letter that stated that.
But the point here,
the government,
100%. But the point here is that, look, in the last couple of years, there's things that are, this is happening in real time. And I think the point of this webinar today is to make the point that when we think about AI, there are certainly software companies that are trying to, plug this into their solutions and functions, but fundamentally, AI is not software. Talk a little bit about this.
Yeah, it's not traditional software. Okay, so, I wrote an article a couple months ago that said, AI will eat software. I thought that was a very cool way of saying it, because Andreessen said software will eat the world. And then Nadella comes out and says software is dead, and he gets all the coverage. I don't know. But the point being here, of course, is that AI is supposed to reduce your use of software. That's the whole point of AI. You should be using less software when you use AI. And I'll give you just a very basic example. If I have to set up a job in an accounting system, a project management system, a CRM, maybe an estimating system, what have you. Let's say at some companies, we see a time tracking system. We see 5, 6, 7 different solutions where a job needs to be entered. If a human is doing this throughout your company, and even if it only takes 15 minutes for each person, there's 6 different logins. There's 6 different opportunities for a mistake. There are 6 different people coming from the field and going to a very unnatural environment, a monitor and a keyboard, and typing in that project number. Just this very simple example. There is potentially 6 hours of machine time across all those systems and all those people. If you have a digital worker do that for you once an award has been marked as won, and no human has to do it, it's just there. So you can start tracking time, so you can start tracking AP invoices, so you can start forecasting and budgeting. You've used less software, not more. And I think that's the best analogy that I can give you. When you are on an assembly line in 2025, there are 80 robotic arms and about 15 folks. 100 years ago, when Henry Ford did this the first time, there were 100 people on the assembly line. The 15 folks aren't babysitting the robots. The robots are doing their job unsupervised and unassisted by a human unless they break. The humans are augmenting the robot's workflow so that the car gets built efficiently and at a higher level of quality. That is the difference between an AI robot and software. Yes, we use software to create AI, but our goal when you buy AI is to use less software because it is unnatural. That PC revolution was very, very good in 1985. We are stuck to our keyboards and our screens and not doing the work we need to do to build. And not just build buildings, but everything. Build our companies. Focus on our people. Focus on our culture. We are constantly in TPS reporting, if anybody knows the Office Space analogy, TPS reporting model. So when people talk about what is the AI revolution, the AI revolution is unlocking your requirement to use technology. It's less tech than more tech because AI in its ultimate form should be an assistant that does the stuff on the computers in the cloud, speaking the same language as that computer system needs to speak so you can go back to work. Now, we can talk about the fear of that. When your job as a computer operator, you were hired to enter stuff into a computer. We need to talk about that. We need to talk about that abject fear. But at this point, we're saying AI should make you use less software, not more.
Right. And I think the other thing is that this is about orchestration, right?
Okay.
So, you'll hear us as well talk about this concept of the digital worker, which is a combination of those 4 categories, the 3 of the categories that Bassam mentioned. But AI is using the software that you already have in place. Right. It's logging into the application and doing the work for you. And I think you mentioned, just I wanted to share this. This is a good way to kind of visualize this concept is software was originally built for a single user in the 90s with the PC, right? Then you saw the, emergence of cloud-based software, but it still required a human to log in and enter data into a screen. We're talking about digital robots, digital workers that sit on top of these applications that you already have in place and that do the work in the software on your behalf.
And you know what's so freeing for Brick? When we were initially pitching Brick in 2019, we couldn't say we wanted to be a robot company, right? Nobody even understood what that meant. We gave it euphemisms. We gave it hand waving. We said it's an automation company. Oh, we're fintech. We kept on having to find other ways to convince people, Brick's a cool company. Fast forward to the AI revolution that we're living in today. People want robots to do the jobs that they want to augment. And this is a great graphic and a great visual of it. When we think about, how much software you already own, and the fact that everybody on this call is part of a company that is profitable, successful, potentially growing, you have workflows that are innate to your business. And I'll use this analogy that one of our clients gave me. When Tesla trained autopilot on their cars, they couldn't change the rules of the road. A red light was a red light. You have to stop. When you buy software in that middle area, you had to retool and retrain your entire company on an entirely different workflow, which is extremely disruptive, has a 50% chance of failure, slows you down in the short term during implementations, is expensive, just so you can go from one accounting system to the other, from one PM system to the other. At the end, what was the ROI? You were tracking an RFI in Procore or Prolog. Now you're tracking it in Procore. You're still tracking the same RFI, typing in the same keystrokes. Maybe it's prettier, maybe it's faster, I don't know. But the net ROI in that middle area really just boiled down to network management. The fact that everybody was working on the same record, not multiple versions of the record. That's the dirty secret of software. Dirty secret of software in that middle column is that all we really got was data normalization, that there was one version of the drawing, not 10. When you're in the PC world, there was 10 versions. In the cloud world, there's one that everybody's collaborating on. That is all we got out of that generation. That provided the ROI. That was the only ROI software offers. Fast forward to the robot world. Asking a robot to do an online takeoff and providing quantities and bills of materials so that an estimator could bid 300 jobs instead of 100 jobs, and you win 2 or 3% of that work, that is real ROI. And that's what AI is offering us. This is the biggest revolution in technology we've ever experienced. The question is, in my mind, I think we made it very business to consumer. ChatGPT is $20 a month and sitting on kids' phones. We need to talk about how B2B needs to change their workflows, or not change their workflows, but accept and adopt AI as a technology set and stop buying more software.
Yeah. And maybe we can talk about the anatomy of what we talk about, this digital worker. So how does this actually do it? I want to just leave, before we leave to there, I want to just, we leave this point. AI is not software. Two buckets here, right? So when you're looking at technology, you need to think of think of less of like, you're not buying AI software, you're hiring digital workers. It does require a bit of a rewiring of the brain, but there's really two buckets here. There's this kind of traditional software that's maybe in that cloud-based. You mentioned the ERP BASM, a CRM, a project management. I like to call this like a digital filing cabinet. It just records something that's happened. The other category that you have to just start, this is the brand new category that why software is dead, is that they're not AI. Digital workers are not filing cabinets. They're digital assistants. Think of them as kind of people that digital assistant controller, assistant PM, project assistant. And this becomes kind of your system of action. Again, sitting on top of everything you already have and executing those tasks and executing the workflows that you've already built.
I want to give another analogy before we move on, which, you mentioned timesheet programs. And I have a very good friend in the industry from the South that's a CFO of a large contractor. And they have timesheet tracking, and they have field workers, and they decided we're going to go on a mission to buy a mobile time tracking tool. Okay. Is a mobile time tracking tool going to make them more efficient is the question. They said, we need to track time in a standardized way. I have 3 people sitting in a room producing a weekly time card for every superintendent, and we're growing 100% this year. So we're going to go from 30 superintendents to 50. That's 50 times per week. I'm going to send a manual timesheet. Everybody on this call knows what we're talking about. If you're going to send out this timesheet, you need the crew on the side, you need dates, and you need cost codes. And you got to build that, and those cost codes better be valid. So they were going to go out and buy a timesheet tracking program and train an average age crew of 61-year-old superintendents on how to use a mobile time tracking tool. They were going to spend over $100,000. It was going to take a minimum of 6 to 9 months. And they were going to have to retool everybody's hardware. Everybody's hardware would have to be retooled into receiving an iPad, of which at that point they had not done yet. Enormous amount of money. Enormous amount of money. That is buying software. What they bought from Brick is a digital worker, actually multiple digital workers, that generate that Excel spreadsheet automatically with only valid cost codes for that job, with only valid employees for that job. Email it to the superintendent every week. Remind the superintendent to enter in time. Tells the superintendent when they're late, just like a human would. Receives the response. Analyzes the results in real time. Did Ellis work 80 hours on 2 different jobs? Whatever. Looks at for anomalies. And when everything is clean, enters it into the accounting system like a human would, types it into a screen. The payroll manager reviews the time cards and press post. I like column B over column A. And so when we say software is dead, which is this very, very bold statement, if you have a process that has worked for you for 25 years, but it's janky and requires a lot of human capital to maintain and manage, and a robot can do the same workflow without complaining, without getting COVID, without taking a smoke break, and sends out those Excel spreadsheets for entry and receives them and tracks anomalies and controls those Excel spreadsheets so they can't break them. The superintendent can't break them. You're getting an immediate return on investment. An immediate return on investment because 3 people no longer have to produce 50 Excel spreadsheets per week and make the mistake of having invalid cost codes, invalid jobs, invalid employees. That system handles, the robot handles the system. The system doesn't handle your company. And that is as simple as I can put an analogy. They didn't buy a timesheet. They bought a timesheet robot. And that's a big difference and a big dichotomy of what people need to understand, that folks are buying robots to do workflows. You got to stop buying software to do those workflows. I'll give you one more analogy. I know I love my analogies. At Brick, we have approximately a year ago, 50 Salesforce licenses, 50. One for everybody in CS, one for sales, whatever. And that was the system of record, a digital filing cabinet for customers, opportunities, all of that. It's an unnatural workflow. So CS people hated logging into Salesforce. Salespeople, we know, hate logging into Salesforce to enter in all this data. We eat our own dog food, use our own automation tools. We have 3 Salesforce licenses now, 3 from 50, because people are just doing their work and we're automating the data into Salesforce. The 3 are me, the system operator, and a business intelligence report writer. 3 people. Big difference.
Yeah, big difference. And so, I think the other, Bassem, I will ask this question because this does come up. We're used to operating with traditional software. Like there's a screen that we click, there are buttons, there's what we interact with. Mm-hmm. So if I'm using a digital worker, if I'm using one of these assistants, what do I use to control it? How does that work?
Yeah, think of it as a dashboard or a control panel that you would have on your dishwasher or your washing machine, right? When you turn on the washer and it just washes your clothes, it beeps when it's done. And if there isn't a problem, you just take your clothes out and you're done. You don't sit and stare at your washing. Oh, maybe you do. You got to have a lot of time in your hands, but you don't just sit and watch the washer. You go away. And so what we call the audit trail or the anomaly detection, we call it the hand raising screen. And what that means is, let's give you an example. We process thousands of COIs as digital risk managers. So we have a virtual digital risk manager. The virtual digital risk manager at the most basic level takes a COI, first checks for fraud. It does a pan and zoom for fraud. Did somebody cut and paste this? Is this fake? Is this a duplicate? So it's looking for fraud. Second, it's looking for the insurance amounts. Third, it's looking for the additional insured, the correct riders, what have you, right? It's looking for all of that. If all of that is correct, you're good to go. Pass it through to the accounting system, mark it as compliant, for instance, or PM system or a spreadsheet, whatever. Mark it as a compliant, just like a risk manager would.
I couldn't say.
I would say that 80% can go that way. You should only be dealing with the 20% where it needs to raise a hand and say, they didn't add the additional assured. They're underinsured on, 500,000, 7 million on general liability, whatever you have there. This is an owner operator, so they need workman's comp insurance. Those are the anomalies you should be working on. And when you work an anomaly, you work in an inbox. It could be your email. It could be the Brick app. But you're working in just the messages of an individual anomaly. That's the core here. It's a very different paradigm. You're not going to a screen. We want people in Brick less, not more. That was the opposite metric at Procore and CMIC when we worked there. I want less users, not more users. The more users that means that the bot is requiring more supervision. And if you hired an AP manager to sit on your desk every day and ask you 100 questions for each invoice, you'd fire that AP manager. Robots need to operate unsupervised and only raise a hand when needed.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a question in, and I don't know, Bastian, we have probably a couple of minutes here. I want to give folks that time to ask questions. I don't know if we want to go in. Right. You want to talk about we can get some questions in. Do we have time to talk about the anatomy of the digital worker?
Let's do it. We started a couple of minutes late. Jim's got a great question. Pipe takeoff, civil excavation takeoffs. So we've trained a robot to read drawings. So it all started with a great client that had massive amounts of drawing sets that, ultimately couldn't be processed fast enough. Couldn't be processed fast enough for estimating, couldn't be processed fast enough for anything, quite frankly, unfortunately. So we built a robot that understands and reads drawings and understands the hieroglyphics of construction symbology, right? Can measure. It can do what you do in estimating software. It could use your estimating software or use some embedded technology that we built that does measurements and takeoffs, gets quantities, essentially, gets quantities out. What you want to do with that type of thing, Jim, is you want, at least for the first little while, for it to just be a gut check on your estimates. So at first, you need to get trust from a robot. Like if you hire Jenny or Johnny estimator and you give them a set of drawings day one, you would probably check their work. And so use the robot in day one to upload the drawings and get quantities and bills of materials out of the drawings. We even now have a module that's going to relate specifications to that. So you get a little bit more from a submittal log or what have you. So Jim, that's where I would start. I would not start by saying, I'm not going to estimate anymore. I would start by saying, this is going to be my gut check. This is going to be my check. As the bot gets better and better, as that robot gets better and better, you're going to be able to bid more projects because you're going to trust it more. Obviously, the thing about estimating is as much art as science, right? Getting a carry number, getting prices, knowing your relationships is not for a robot. Your interpersonal relationships with subcontractors or vendor suppliers that are going to give you a 15% discount so you can win the job, that's not for you. And this is a very important delineator. Getting quantity out of a drawing set, let's say, is something a robot can do really well and will eventually, you're not going to require the takeoff skill set. Calling up a good relation, say, I need this project, I need to lean on you, 10% discount, is something a human's going to do. So this was something I alluded to earlier. Jobs aren't going away. You're going to bid more jobs. You're going to do more quantity. You're going to grow. You're going to get more work. You're going to be more profitable. Your job is not going to be the tedious takeoff. Your job is to get really, really good at pricing the tedious takeoff data. So when we think about what the world looks like in the future of work, You're going to focus on the human aspect of your jobs. It's inhumane to sit till midnight or 3 a.m. to do an online takeoff. It's inhumane. Let the machine do that. They do it really well. It's human nature to interact with other people to get the best price. We've been doing it since the markets of Giza and the Egyptian pyramid. That's what we do as a human race. We interact, we negotiate, we get money down. Estimators don't have to be expert computer users. They got to be expert relationship people. And Jim, that's how you can ultimately change your job. And that's what it'll do. I'm going to go through the anatomy of a digital worker so I can explain. When you look at a robot, it's easy for people to understand a robot because it has like arms. And, if you've ever seen a science fiction movie like iRobot or what have you, robots make sense. Our robots are virtual. They're digital. They're bits and bytes. So we kind of created this infographic to explain the aspects of a robot. A robot thinks. Our robots think. And they make decisions. You make hundreds of innate decisions every single day. Sometimes you don't even think about it. It's human nature. It's part of evolution. You're thinking. We had to train our solutions, our robots, to be able to think. And what thinking means is, oh, this is a new vendor. I don't have a W-9. I should stop payment. That's thinking. Those are things that you innately do. Thinking came after the one that is a little less sexy, which is context and learning. What we realized is there needs to be a standard language, regardless of system workflow. An estimator calls it an estimate. A project manager calls it a budget. A accountant calls it a cost budget and a revenue budget. All of those things may be the same thing, but are all being used as different. It's like touching the elephant. We had to teach the robots a language, regardless of the source language, Spanish or English, regardless of the source system, accounting or project management, regardless of the role or person, estimator or accountant. Giving meaning to data is what drives these robots to understand things fast. The other thing that came next was the ability to see. So our robots have the ability to see and operate. I'll give you a great example. Computeries, well-used Dell Tech accounting system. It's very old and it's client server. And it's really, really kind of a old system. And if your robot can't see where to navigate, can't operate it, can't control it, it can't automate it. And that's why we had to give the robot eyes, and we did give them eyes. Now, when we talk about taking action, those are the hands of the robot. That's the ability to raise a hand. That's the ability to type at the typewriter. Looks like a player piano in the Old West. It's just playing, it's just working. It's opening up screens. It's doing searches. It's doing all. That's taking it. So that's the hands of the machine. The most recent advent is using instinct. The best way I can describe this is when an invoice comes in, your AP person that's been with you for 40 years innately knows it's going to be one of 4 cost codes. You're going to read the invoice, say it's bricks, and put it to 04300. That's instinct. Computers, robots don't have a gut. They don't get it. They don't get it. So what do? You build something that integrates with our LLM, which is, I think, officially the largest large language model ever built for the industrialized industries, power generation, data centers, construction, traditional, horizontal, vertical, that can make an educated guess based on all things considered and its past. And so that really, when we think about buying a robot to add to a job, buying a robot to augment your work like an online takeoff, that's what we're talking about. Yep. I'm open to more questions. I mean, we're 6 minutes over. We usually go over, but.
Yeah, I mean, I think, questions, Bassem, as folks think of, so I know like other questions we commonly get would be like, hey, I run Sage, or I run Foundation, I run Procore. Like what, and like, is this Am I ready as a business to take this on? What technology do I need? What skill sets do I need to
Yeah.
use digital workers?
Yeah, the nice thing about us being so focused on critical industries like construction is that we've trained these workers to use software and the workflows in the industries we serve, right? So we know estimate to budget, we know job initiation, we know estimate to commitment, we know the procure to pay cycle in these industries. So when you know these things, it's like going to Manpower or an HR firm and hiring a person that has the skills and experience to run the workflows in your industry and are also trained on the software you own, right? They're trained in the software you own. What they do, they have the skills. That's what I call it. They have the skill set. They can process invoices. They can read. They can, in this case, use Foundation. They know how to enter in an invoice in Foundation. They know how to track school jobs versus non-school jobs, taxable or not taxable, use taxes. It has those skills. What it doesn't know is your workflows. So how you get started is hire the bot that you need to solve your problem. A virtual business analyst, a virtual risk manager, a virtual AP manager, a virtual AR manager. We have several. Hire the robot, and then for the first 90 to 120 days, you're training this robot to do work just like you hired Jenny or Johnny, the employee. So first 30 days, they're going to be okay at their job. The next 30, they're going to get better. And then the next 30, they're going to get better and better. That's the goal. Your job is to continuously train this thing, just like if you hired a person. So the question is, am I ready for AI automation? The answer is, if you're a business and you're in business and you run software, you are ready for AI automation, because otherwise you will drown in more software and more software and more software.
That's 100%. And by the way, this is a video of one of our digital workers using Foundation. It looks like I'm screen recording, somebody using it on their own. This is not a human using this software right now.
It's really an amazing thing to see. It really is. And, it's less sexy than Anthropic. It's less sexy than, having a bot, take out your spam mail or whatever. And it is just so much more. It's so much more about making, this is like the most recent thing everybody's been talking about. What happened to software, helping, us that work in real industries. Like, software is being so driven around filters and Instagram and influencers and taking great photos of, online chefs, whatever. But at the end of the day, we've been left with like chisels to do our jobs. I mean, Foundation is a 35-year-old company and the software is 30 years old. And this is what we've been asked to use. So,
yeah. Okay, here's a question that just came in. And I'm just going to pop this up for anyone that wants to get a deeper dive of what this stuff looks like in action. Okay, question. How do you foresee Brick being able to recognize problems when doing takeoffs? For example, if you're in an electrical contracting outlets, 208 volt, but the equipment table on a different table shows it needs to be 480.
I think the conflict detection, the anomaly detection, so in products, there's a lot of mistakes, by the way. I'm probably preaching to the choir. The drawings and specs, there are so many variations. We see anomalies where one sheet is like, it's totally non-related. We try to do 3D and we try to do BIM and, we call it, clash detection. We talk about all this stuff, but we're building in 2D, right? In North America, we build in 2D. We build off drawings and specs. And when we see a set of drawings that have that issue where there's, a product requirement here of a certain width or a certain depth or a certain, requirement, then I get a spec sheet that neither the twain shall meet. And I go to the same, in a different view on the same drawing set in a different sheet, has an entirely different, set of requirements. When you see all of that happening, you run into some pretty scary things as a human. It also requires you to stop and unnaturally stop your job to look things up. The anomaly detection on the drawing conflicts that we're getting on products are pretty good. but it is still a log. It's still somewhere you need to go. And it says, these are the 16 things that you need to look for. That's where we're at right now. And this Jordan is asking the question. That's where we're at right now. It's not going to go out and, reach out to somebody and try to resolve that issue. I'll give you a very basic example. This is called drawings autopilot. When the drawing comes in and is read, let's say the drawing is version 2. And in Procore, there's version 3. It's going to raise an anomaly and say this is the wrong version. You could do that in Procore. What you can't do in Procore is have that OCR be any accurate, because Procore is using old style OCR. We're using pan and zoom, zooming in, looking at things. So you have basic anomalies. You still need to resolve that as a human. The nice thing here is that those anomalies are going to be at your top of your work list. You're going to knock out those anomalies. If there is product specification, thickness, depth, other things that are conflicting each other, the robot will raise a hand and ask you in an anomaly. We got a question for Trevor. For companies that are skeptical about AI adoption, what are some small... I will only sell small scale, low risk ways to introduce AI tools. We will only sell one autopilot and focus on one laser focused workflow. We have heard the industry loud and clear. You don't buy AI like you buy software. You're hiring a robot to do a job. So you find a job. So this is the way I evaluate if it's worth it for Brick and it's worth it for a client. Give you a great example. The COI example is pretty binary, so I like it. We had a client review 9,600 COIs in the previous year, 2023. It takes about 10 minutes to review, log in, checkbox. That is 2,000 person hours. So they had a person doing it full time. And they called him a risk manager. They were going through every COI. They were growing 30%. They expected the COI coverage to grow as well. So they were going to hire another person. That was one person year that they were going to add to their staff. Maybe they would have started part-time, but you can see how those things go. One person year, train them, onboard them, what have you. They found Brick. It was cheaper than a person year considerably. They bought Brick. Fantastic. This is the workflow they bought. That is worth it. That is worth it. Where you see a half a person year, 1,000 person hours a year saved, 500 person hours a year saved. We've had clients come to us with automations within, certain modules and say, I think we'll save an hour a month. That's not worth it for Brick. That's not worth it for you. I wouldn't spend the money. Focus on things that you need to save person hours on. But not just about that. I call this the drive for show. People have probably heard me say this. The drive for show is saving the hours. It's the cost of a mistake and the latency of data that really matter. So I'll give you that same example. 9,600 invoices, 9,600 COIs, one of them underinsured. Unfortunately, in this case, there was a loss on a project, a data center, the floor collapsed. That COI that was missed was for that subcontractor. And it cost them $500,000 in deductible because you know how it goes. They're self-insured. They have to fill the gap. So because of that underinsured, because that person missed it, because humans make mistakes, that cost them $500,000. So yeah, it's great to save the one man year or one person year. It's much better to save the mistake. Another client had $3,000 on average of AP invoices missed, delayed, lost, stuck in the email box, stuck in somebody's drawer. $3,000 a project doesn't sound a lot, but when you do 100 projects, that adds up every year. That's $300,000. That's where you choose to start. Start where there's a cost of error, there's a cost of latency, and you don't have enough time to do it. Parker says, I assume to adopt Brick, there will need to be some sort of standardized process. Do you offer support in this? Brick is a package of software and services. The first call is the solutions call, which we call the playbook. This is going to be the first implementation call where we don't belittle you. Software says, no, you got to do it this way now. Log into Procore, go into this RFI screen, rub your head, pat your tummy, whatever, that's it. No judgment. We look at your workflow. I'm going to give you, I don't know, Parker, if you've been on since the beginning, the example of the timesheet program. The timesheet program, buying a timesheet or buying a robot that manages the timesheet process. There's only going to be one style of Excel spreadsheet delivered by the robot to the superintendent. The superintendent will have less ability to change and add a column or delete something. That's just a truism. They're going to have a standard Excel template per job type. That's what it's easier for a robot to do that, not per person, right? Jenny in accounting might like the superintendent, so she will alter the timesheet for the superintendent. The robot's not going to do it. So there is standardization in the formatting of the Excel spreadsheet. There is standardization on that. But the reality is construction is a full contact sport. You can't change certain things. So that timesheet in Excel to the 70-year-old superintendent is going to remain. That's not going to change. So we want standardization to be minimized, not increased. We want only standardization where data quality improves. You might have a standard list of cost codes, but if they're not if they're not on the project, the timesheet entry is going to fail. So when we create the Excel spreadsheet, we're only going to load the standard list of cost codes on that project, that sort of thing. So that's where standardization happens. You need to just go where construction is. For many years selling an accounting software package, which I did for my first 15 years of my life, I said, make the superintendent write a PO. Make them for things they bought. I've still said that at Procore 15 years later. People are still saying that to you today. It's like, make them do this. They should do this. You make them make a PO. Yeah. Superintendent needs 1,000 widgets. They're going to call their buddy, get 1,000 widgets delivered, installed before you even get the invoice. That's just reality. You need workflows and robots that deal with the real, not the fantasy land that a programmer propeller head said this is the way it should be. So that's less standardization, not more.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, look, I think for those that are intrigued, you get the concept, you're going, okay, what does it look like? How do I do it? Am I ready to do it? I highly recommend you book some time with us. I will put up I will share the link here. It's just brick.com/demo.
Yeah, and you know what? We are doing some great things on the podcast. It's less about Brick. I mean, maybe you can share this Spotify. Like it's a lot more about the world at large in technology. We're getting some great feedback on it. I'd love for you guys to join in to follow it and give us some feedback on episodes that you're interested in hearing about. We are, definitely moving fast in this world. We're also coming up with a book that's going to be available in a couple of months, I believe. It's called Decoding AI. Everybody will, be receiving some form of communication on this, I'm sure, thanks to our marketing department. Decoding AI really is just talking about a lot of what we're talking about here. How do we use AI to automate the future of work and change how we do things? So we'll be coming out with that shortly.
Yeah, lots of ways to stay tuned, and we're always available to answer questions. And so, look, we thank you to everybody for taking time on your busy day, for our clients that are on, for those that are future clients, and those that are AI curious. We hope to all talk to you soon, and we'll see you on the next live webinar in a couple of weeks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everybody. Take care. Bye-bye.